to another episode of Pretty Brilliant. If you're new to me, my name is Brittany Nicole. On this channel, we explore the relationship between language, the nervous system, and behavior. I talk about reprogramming your mind to level up your life. And this is a very special episode for me. This is about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart and very near and dear to my life. And I'm not exactly sure all of the things that I'm going to say here. I just kind of got the idea earlier in my head. I'm reading a book and I was like, you know what? If I had read this book during the time of actually still being in that awful, toxic, violent relationship, then that would have clicked and shifted some things for me in my mind. So I have put together a list of the books that I would have given my younger self to empower her, to arm her with information. And my only goal here is really to help someone who needs that information. The unfortunate truth for many women is that leaving an abusive dynamic is not something that you can just do. There are many women who stay because they are being provided for financially or in some way, or they need physical care, or I've heard so many reasons. So I want to provide solutions in the form of thoughtware, because that's what you have. If you don't have money, if you don't have resources, you have your thoughts. And that is powerful. Sometimes when I talk about this stuff, like memories just come up. So I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I'm going to go ahead and share. This movie with Jennifer Lopez called Enough. There was a day that I had watched the movie years ago when I was like a teenager. So I already saw the movie, but I was watching it one day when I was home by myself. And in the movie, she has an abusive, I think he's like, I don't know if he's her current husband and she left, or he's an ex-husband. I can't remember that part, but she has an abusive male partner that she gets away from, and she like trains herself. She physically trains herself. She starts training with, I think it's like a boxing coach. And he's not just training her physically, he's also training her mentally, because she has this plan that she's gonna get free from him. I won't ruin the story if you haven't seen it. I remember watching that movie because I wanted to be inspired by her grit. And the thought that she prepared in the way that she could prepare stayed with me. That landed with me. And so what I'm attempting to do with this video is to give you armor of thought, weapon of thought, so that you can cut through the cognitive dissonance that I know you are living in or have lived in. So I'm going to share 4 books that I think are very powerful to arm you intellectually and help you cut through the confusion that comes with living in an abusive environment. I remember being in the thick of things, right? And trying to figure out, am I really experiencing what I'm experiencing, or am I the problem? And I stayed in that mental space for years. And when you have someone who is living in a reality where they actually truthfully feel that you exist to serve them and to not be a human being, they can do a very effective job at convincing you that normal, healthy things are harming them, that setting boundaries is causing harm, that having preferences is causing harm. And that their version of causing harm is not harmful at all. Like, it is violent to them. It's an act of violence to them when you set a boundary. It is an act of violence to them when you insist on your dignity. First of all, I'm going to recommend my book. I'm going to recommend my book. Yes, I am. And not just like to sell books, although that's important and not shameful. The reason that I'm recommending my book is because this is a unique perspective. When you are in a abusive relationship, your mindset is one that someone who is not in an abusive relationship cannot understand. You're literally running an operating system that, if you haven't experienced the confusion and the constant gaslighting and the constant attack on your psychology. You won't be able to understand the survival logic your mind and body takes on so that you can navigate that scenario. However, I lived it. So these are not theories. These are not just like research, things that I've researched in reports. This is my actual lived experience that I have alchemized into lessons. And the way that I've structured it is, not only am I breaking down my mindset or the mindset of someone who is in an abusive relationship as the victim mindset, I'm also breaking down the villain mindset, which is how I've designed the book. So in my book, I have an analysis of the victim mindset, the villain mindset, and then what I call the director mindset, which is how you begin to re-author your own thoughts, re-author your own mental operating system. And if you've been in any form of abusive relationship, whether that's physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, financially, etc., you have been under a mental attack. You have been mentally injured on purpose, which is awful. But the great thing about that is you are the person who is in control of your mind. So even if you can't physically remove yourself from the environment, you can begin to retrain your mind, get control back of your mind, and navigate your situation strategically. It's called Why Does He Do That? It's by Lundy Bancroft. And I came across this book. I was at work one day, and when I was working in IT at the time, and so I would always listen to podcasts while I was working. The podcast is called Betrayal Trauma Recovery. I found that podcast because at the time I was trying to recover from infidelity, and I was struggling with that because I didn't really want to. Like I was forced into this concept of you need to forgive your partner. That's the spiritual thing to do. God hates a divorce is what everyone projected on me. And because I cared about my relationship with God, I felt like I needed to obey that advice. So I'm at work trying to deal with the fact that I really don't want to fucking be in this relationship anymore, but God says I have to, I guess. So I found this podcast called Betrayal Trauma Recovery. I believe she's still making episodes, and that podcast changed my life. I just took in every episode that I could think of because it had women who were talking about things that nobody wanted to admit, right? It had women who were naming experiences of being married to someone who was abusive in ways that was very subtle or covert or left you questioning, was this wrong? Am I the problem here? And I never heard anyone describing covert narcissistic abuse before. So I ate every episode of that podcast up. And one of the episodes, she talked about this book, Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. And I have to admit, I got the book and it took me a long time to want to read it because, so Lundy Bancroft, he works specifically with abusive men. He counsels abusive men. So this is someone who has an up close and personal perspective, man to man, with the men who admit that they abuse women. And so his perspective is very valuable simply because he has the experience with these type of people. And so in his book, he talks about the mindset of the men that he observed and the patterns that he observed about the way abusive men act and the way abusive men think. This book was one of the hardest books for me to read because the clarity is unflinching, and that's what you need. Honestly, you need a wake-up call that is going to break through that logic that is telling you that it's not as bad as you think, because that logic was not installed by you. You have been conditioned to think that being on the receiving end of harm, if it doesn't look a certain way or if it doesn't happen that often, that it's not that bad. And this is a book that once you read it, it really is hard to not see things clearly again. One of the things I highlighted was feeling sorry for your partner can be a trap, making you feel guilty for standing up to his abusiveness. That was relevant for me at the time. Here's a note that I wrote in here. I underlined this. He says, abusive men are uncomfortable when they see signs of budding independence in their partner and often look for ways to undermine the woman's progress in the days ahead. And I have an arrow here that says, like having a kid. And what that was about was there was a time I was considering going back to school. I really wanted to study plant medicine and consciousness, and I was starting to realize that I had a talent for this. And I shared that I wanted to get a PhD. Like I was like, you know what? I think I want to be a doctor. The reaction that I got was like, you don't need to do that. Like you need to be focused on having a kid. As I like think about that moment, this is when my career was starting to take off. I was considering going back to school. I felt like I was like at the beginning of coming into myself as a woman, and that was the beginning of the end. Like me coming home from work feeling proud of the work that I did at my job started a fight. Like just crazy. I put a star next to, and he has this in quotes, so this is what the abuser is saying to their victim. You're too sensitive, every little thing bothers you, it shouldn't be any big deal. You're just angry because you aren't getting your way, so you're saying I'm mistreating you. Through comments like these, the abuser can try to persuade you that one, you have unreasonable expectations for his behavior and you should be willing to live with the things he does. Two, you are actually reacting to something else in your life, not what he did. And three, you are using your grievances as power moves against him. All of these tactics are a form of discrediting your complaints of mistreatment, which is abusive. His discrediting maneuvers reveal a core attitude, which he never explicitly states and may not even be aware of consciously himself, which is, you have no right to object to how I treat you. I just have to take a breath when I think about the fact that I actually lived with a person who believed that, and that was my reality. I think this book is a really important tool in your mental arsenal because it allows you to see the ways that abusive men think, the logic that they use, the tactics that they will use against you. The book is written for women. The book is written for women who are in abusive relationships with men, although he does talk about different gender dynamics and different orientations as well. It's primarily written for women who are in abusive relationships with men, and it makes it so they can't confuse you as well as they have been doing in the past. I'm interrupting this regularly scheduled program because as I'm editing this video, I realized that I left a whole ass book out that I wanted to tell you about. That book is called Emotional Labor by Rose Hackman. Now, this one is really, really, really important. I'm actually in the process of rereading this book. I read it last year with my women's group. Was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year. I don't know. Anyway, I read this in a group setting, and it created such a domino effect in my life. The language emotional labor in and of itself allowed me to really validate a lot of the things that I had been doing in a lot of my relationships and not really realizing that the effort that I'm putting into suppressing my own emotions to center someone else's emotional experience. I didn't think of that as labor until I had that language. And this book does such an incredible job of laying out all the ways society benefits off of emotional labor while also pretending that it doesn't actually exist. So your girl is like a big time nerd, okay? When I read a book, I take notes like I'm in class. And I have it in my Notion, and it's very organized. My Notion is a work of art. Anyway, side note, I want to share with you two really poignant quotes that I saved from this book. So the first one is from chapter 1, which is, what is emotional labor exactly? So the quote says that the starting point should be that men should provide little to nothing at home, and that women should provide most, puts men into positions of easy praise when they do more than nothing. and almost immediately positions women in a place of deficiency and easy criticism if they do less than everything. Beyond this, it also makes women the default workers for men and men the beneficiaries of women's work. Now, that was eye-opening for me as I reflected on my experience, because I was in a relationship with a person who actually felt entitled to my psychological, emotional, and sexual labor. And if I set any boundaries or limits or had any needs, preferences, or wants of my own, that was seen honestly as an act of treason and violence. This is because the society that we live in codes men and women with these expectations. The next quote is from chapter 4, which is Disciplined in Obedience. And it says, women are pushed to performing this embodied emotional labor of creating experiences for others, pushed to package themselves as products to be enjoyed, consumed, and profited off of. Good girls should generously exist for others and would never sully themselves with vulgar claims for money. As soon as they dare ask for a paycheck, for a share of the money and value they are creating, they become bad. The issue that she's talking about in this particular chapter is how emotional labor is feminized, as if this is what the being of a woman is. It's what her purpose is. It's what her function is in society. The reason that I recommend this book is because if you are in an unsafe relationship, you are doing emotional labor constantly. You are managing expectations, you are managing mood, managing emotion, you are constantly surveilling your environment as well as surveilling yourself. And that is taxing. That is energetically taxing on your body, your nervous system, your thoughts, your emotions. If you feel drained, tired, burned out, it's not by surprise. It is because these are biological processes that you are running with your machine, and it is actually draining you. Emotional labor, I found, helped to really validate that a lot of the things that I would do in relationships, or the ways that I showed up in relationships, was not my personality. It was my conditioning. It was how I was expected to perform. And because you receive recognition at times, or validation at times, or some form of reward for being a person who performs at the pleasure of another, it is easy to perpetuate. When I realized that I was trained to think that way, that's when my boundaries went like from here to here. So it's another day because this episode was kind of hard for me to film and then watch back in the editing process, because I'm reliving my life, and the reality of trauma is that it lives in your body. And even though, I have done a lot of work and recovered in a lot of ways on myself, I am still affected by the experiences that I had. So I just wanted to come on here and close this video out by saying, if this video found you and if this video resonates with you, do not ignore that feeling. Do not ignore that feeling. I don't care who is telling you that you are exaggerating, that it's not that bad, that God hates you. You are perfectly allowed to prioritize your well-being. You do not have to stay in a relationship with someone who is harming you. Their mental illness is not your responsibility. And I would encourage you to have some boundaries with yourself and your empathy. Because one of the things that worked as a ploy on me was feeling bad for wanting to leave. I'm going to say this one last thing and then I'm going to close it out, which is the moment I realized that all the effort that I had been putting in the form of me going to therapy, me buying therapy for both of us, all the books I'm reading, all the conversations that I'm trying to have, trying to get spiritual counseling, trying to change myself. Like, I did all the things, okay? So you're listening to a person who knows. None of that worked. Like, all of that effort was bullshit. I thought that we were doing the work, but I was doing the work for both of us. And you know what the result was? The result was I was helping him be a better liar. because his ability to manipulate and pretend to be someone who's participating in the process so that I don't leave got better. The illusions got better. The lies got better. The temporary good treatment got better. Do not be fooled by that. All the resources will be in the description box below, and make sure to connect with me on Instagram, Twitter, and Substack. I'm on all platforms as I Am Pretty Brilliant. Thank you so much for watching. Share this with somebody who might need this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.